Advance and be recognized, everyone, and welcome to the Sitrep podcast, your forward operations space for all things military and historical wargaming. I am your host, Oriskany Jim, and today we're taking another look at the Battle for Iwo Jima, but this time in true mega game format, using Pete Panzeri's Rommel Rules system for operational scale combat. Now, I know we've hit the Battle for Iwo Jima pretty hard in recent months. Back in February for the 80th anniversary, Dylan and I more or less recreated the entire first day's landings using a heavily modified variant of Avalon Hill's Panzerleader. But when you see the sheer size of this game that Pete put on for us at Das Krieg Haus, home of the South Florida Miniatures Gaming Club, you'll see why I wanted to circle back and make this game into another video. The table is 6 feet wide and I think over 16 feet long, and that right there makes it double the size of our usual tables, already a little bigger than you see at a lot of clubs. The game is presented in 20mm, and interestingly, each turn represents a full day of combat operations. And this is another reason I wanted to circle back and feature this game, because we don't often get to see operational scale gaming here on this channel. So you've seen variants of this system before. We have live streamed Pete's games commemorating the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings in June of last year. This is where he recreated not only the initial landings, but also the advanced expansion and exploitation toward key objectives like Caen, Saint-Lô, and Cherbourg. We also did the 80th anniversary of his Battle of the Bulge game, and here is where his table extended to include all the way from the German jump-off lines all the way to the Meuse River. So, once again, operational scale gaming. Here we'll have 2 complete Marine divisions on the table, and eventually 3, because Pete is looking to recreate the first 4 to 6 days of the invasion. And again, this is where you're going to see things that my Panzerleader game did not attempt to recreate, like the arrival of 3rd Marine Division, the assault of Mount Suribachi, the complete clearing of Motoyama Airfield No. 1, and who knows, we might even reach the outskirts of Airfield No. 2. Pete's game will also feature a much more detailed depiction of American naval gunnery operations and even counterfire from Japanese land batteries, possibly even Japanese kamikaze airstrikes. Again, we're zooming out to get a much wider scope of the higher command levels than you normally see in your average tactical or skirmish wargame. As far as the Battle for Iwo Jima itself, man, I've already bludgeoned you over the head with all of the history and context, and if you're watching this channel, you already know the score. It's February 1945. The Americans are now advancing across the North Pacific, and for a variety of reasons, they need Iwo Jima in order to continue to support and facilitate that advance. And the Japanese 109th Division stands ready to contest the issue. We've got Mark and Tom playing the Marines. They'll be commanding 4th and 5th Marine Divisions respectively, and then later on, myself and Jim Dundorf will share command of 3rd Marine Division, which historically didn't land until D+4. So once again, you're going to be seeing things represented here that you did not see in our earlier tactical level games presented earlier in this year. So how about we head over to the footage and we take a look at the Corps Commander's view for the Battle of Iwo Jima. And here we are, folks. You thought we were done with Iwo Jima, but you were wrong! Alright, in all seriousness, we're looking at Pete Panzeri's awesome 16-foot mega game table for his 80th anniversary commemoration game of the Battle of Iwo Jima. There's the man himself, putting the final touches on his table. Of course, we're looking at Mount Suribachi there at the southern tip of Iwo Jima, and some commemoration materials, including Manila John. That's John Basilone of Guadalcanal fame, who sadly gave his life at Iwo Jima. Meanwhile, the American landings are getting ready to come in. Now you'll notice these little unit labels. They're not just for historical flavor or accuracy, because again, this is an operational game, and Pete's system does have rules for which units report up to which headquarters organizations. That's going to be important for things like supply, artillery support, and also repairing armored vehicles that might get hit and possibly brought back into action overnight. So yeah, you're looking at the regiments and where they landed historically. You're looking at some of the tank battalions, which admittedly aren't on the table yet. And we're just about ready to get this thing started. And of course, we have plenty of Japanese defensive positions lined up and ready to go. No Japanese units yet, they're still hidden, but we'll run across them, don't you worry. But some of these locations are definitely lined up with historical locations, like the quarry and amphitheater there. They're going to give 4th Marine Division plenty of grief, I promise you that. This series of terrain features here are collectively known as the Meat Grinder, along with Hill 382, or Radar Hill. That's overlooking Motoyama Airfield number 2 there. Not quite sure we're going to get quite that far today, but hey, it's one of our objectives. We'll see how we do. And then panning back south down this incredible table, we come to Motoyama Airfield, the number 1. We'll definitely be reaching that, along with, of course, Mount Suribachi, although 28th Marines isn't quite at the top of the mountain yet. So, to start us off, Pete is taking the players through the different phases in his game. He starts off with a confirm supply status, then we go into raids, heavy bombardment, there's a phase for fighter operations, for bomber operations, that's also going to include, of course, Japanese anti-aircraft fire, fortification fire, engineering phase includes demolition and mine clearance, the Allied movement, the Allied attack, and then of course there's a blitz move after that, and of course the Japanese get a complete turn after that. So there's a lot going on here. Okay, the Marines are now ashore. Specifically, we are looking at Mark's 4th Marine sector. Now, real quick, notice I have not only the 25th and 23rd Marine regiments ashore, but also the reserve, or the 2nd wave, 24th Marines. Because again, each turn in this game represents an entire day of operations. So the entire 4th Division is ashore. Technically, 4th Tank Battalion and 14th Artillery would also be ashore by this point, but those units have different phases in the game. But trust me, we're going to see them on the table very, very shortly. But yeah, for right now we have all 3 line regiments of 4th Marine Division on the table. Mark is all set and ready to go. We're going to shift over to 5th Marine Division and see how Tom is doing on his sector of the beach. Alright, here is Tom putting, again, his 5th Marine Division on the table. Again, all 3 of his line regiments will be landing at once because, once again, we are looking at the entire day's operation in a single turn. So, real quick, we're going to go over some of the different unit types in the game. Most commonly, of course, are the guys on round bases. Those are your standard infantry. You'll see some of them come with a little bit of gold embellishment on them. Those are your regimental commanders. Your division commanders will be coming on later on in the turn sequence. The guys on oval bases are your combat engineers, rectangular bases are support teams, and of course we have the Amtraks, which I brought along my fleet of Amtraks to sort of help out and contribute to today's event. Now, some historical purists might point out that, hold on, Oriskany Jim, there was really no such thing as an engineer regiment in these Marine divisions, and of course that's correct. They had a battalion of engineers and a battalion of pioneers, which in this game we're kind of combining into a fictional regiment, air quotes, of sorts. But again, if you look at how Mark is deploying his engineers, again, all the guys on oval bases, they're not clumped up in a regiment like, say, 23rd, 24th, and 25th Marines are. They are spread out among the line regiments. Number 1, it's a war game, you play your figures how you want, and number 2, that's how you use your combat engineers in a real-life situation anyway. We also have some Japanese historical deployments ready to go, like 312th Battalion of 2nd Mixed Brigade. This is where they were on the day, defending the southern approaches to Airfield number 1, but no actual Japanese figures. Instead, we have these bottle caps, and what they represent are probable Japanese defensive positions. So how it works is, once a Marine unit draws within a certain distance of one of these probable locations, Pete makes a roll, and that determines whether or not there are Japanese units in there, and what their composition is. You'll notice several Japanese machine gun pits have already been revealed, and we're about to engage them in some close combat. 3rd Battalion of the 25th is getting absolutely shot to ribbons by some revealed Japanese locations. Sadly, this is about what happened to them. And what you'll notice here is that Mark is only flipping over his eliminated units. He's not removing them, because he still gets to shoot them in what is essentially a simultaneous fire phase. Over here to Tom's position with 5th Marines, again, he has blundered into some Japanese machine gun nests, and he is now taking casualties as well. But again, he's only flipping over his units because they still get to shoot back. so the losses on both beaches are pretty rough. Actually, a little bit worse on 4th Marine Division sector. Another thing that Pete's table captures really well is the absolute chaos and congestion of the Marine landing beaches, making them perfect targets for elevated artillery. To the left, over on Mount Suribachi, and the right at positions like the quarry. And yes, here we see our first wrecked Amtrak vehicle burning on the beaches of Iwo Jima. So here's another of my small contributions to today's table, the LVT A4s of 2nd Armored Amphibious Battalion. That's these guys here with the short-barreled 75mm assault howitzers on them. Historically, they landed in a broad screen in front of the invasion wave, and they didn't last very long, but so far today, they're doing pretty well. So after all that simultaneous counterfire, Mark's Marines have only eliminated a handful of Japanese infantry stands. I'll be honest, he's not doing very well so far. The system is very simple to get your head around. You gather up a whole bunch of D6s, you chuck them in a box, and you're looking for 6s. And holy hell, look at that roll. All those dice, he only got 1 6. That's a crap roll if I've ever seen one. Let's hope Mark does a little bit better with his next batch of dice. So one of the key mechanics here is you add up all the dice in an eligible attack, and then you have to divide that in half if you're firing at entrenched or concealed positions, which of course he is. Now, you get to redouble that back to your original starting point if you're using what Pete's system defines as combined arms. So in this case, Mark was able to do that because what he's firing, as well as all of his infantry troops, he's bringing in suppressive fire from his Amtraks that you see stacked up right behind him. So he's doing a little bit better now with 2 more Japanese kills. And here is the final butcher's bill for the first turn in 4th Marine Division sector. 4 Japanese stands down for 5 Marine stands down. Yeah, the Marines came out on the losing end of that one, and things are still pretty bloody in 4th Marine Division sector. Here's another fun rule to quickly highlight. You'll notice a lot of these Marine Amtraks are carrying dice with the number 2 showing on them. This indicates that they are, long story short, take your first shot, stuck in the loose volcanic ash that was so characteristic of the landing beaches on Iwo Jima. So now both the Japanese and the Americans have taken their full fire phases. Things in 4th Marine Division sector are still very bloody. There's the total butcher's bill tray you saw a second ago. Looking over here at 5th Marine Division sector though, and then looking at Tom's butcher's bill tray, he's actually doing a lot better. Look at this, these are all destroyed Japanese positions. Looks like he's got 9 stands knocked down at the cost of only 3, so a lot better there. Zooming out for a wide shot here, we are now beginning the heavy bombardment phase. This is when American battleships, there were 8 battleships in all involved in the bombardment of Iwo Jima. That's a lot. There were only 2 at Omaha Beach for comparison. And that white smoke shows Japanese gunnery positions that have been hit by American battleship fire. Then we start with the American air phase. Now, quick apology, honestly, those fighters should be Corsairs, Avengers, Helldivers, things like that. Aircraft you would have seen off of Spruance's 5th Fleet, but these are the P-38s that Pete has available. And of course you also see some bombers there. So the fighters do replenish turn after turn, but those 4 bombers, the Americans only get to use those once, and then that's it for the game, so they gotta be careful with those. Alright, so now the American players have divvied up the air assets for this phase, and they're each allocating their airstrikes, deciding where they want to go. Looks like they're going for heavy Japanese artillery positions because these guys are now trading fire with American battleships and cruisers. And yeah, that did happen in the actual battle, and the American ships did take some damage. So all of the airstrikes have now been allocated, and it's time to start assessing the damage they inflict on these Japanese positions. So, how much damage can these positions take? Well, you see that red dice there on the roof of that bunker. That indicates it's taken 4 hits. They can take 4 hits and then 1 more, and they're obliterated off the table. So that position's already in really bad shape. It's 8 attack dice for a fighter, 16 for a bomber. Although bomber strikes can admittedly drift depending on how they land. And of course, we also have to worry about Japanese anti-aircraft positions. There are a lot of them on this table. And if they score enough hits on a fighter or a bomber, they remove it from play. That's especially bad for a fighter because remember, these fighters do return each turn, but if one of them is shot down, then that fighter will not return for next turn's attack. Here's a quick look from the Japanese commander's perspective. Now, the actual garrison commander, Major General Kurabayashi, would have been a lot further north than this, but the table only goes so far. But I hope this shot gives you a general idea of their perspective. Alright, so all the American airstrikes have now gone in. We're starting to mark the last hits on Japanese bunkers. You see that bunker only took a single hit there, so that one's still good to go. That one's doing a little bit worse with 3 hits. You guys get the idea. And some of these ones with white smoke have been just completely obliterated. Don't have to worry about those anymore. But now we're counting up Japanese anti-aircraft positions. That's 1, 2, 3 so far. 4, 5, 6 that was right there a minute ago, and then 2 more at the top of the screen. That's going to be a total of 8 positions shooting back at American aircraft, and that batch is going to knock down 1 American fighter. That's less than ideal, and there goes another American fighter. Okay, we've got some more positions down here, but they miss. Alright, so 2 American fighters are down and will not be returning next turn. Okay, long story short, take your second shot. It's a hot day for the Navy as some of their cruisers begin taking direct hits from Japanese shore batteries. And yeah, this kind of thing did happen at Iwo Jima. The Marines are now moving forward, sort of pushing inland, hoping to secure some kind of breakthrough. It's not going to happen. There are no breakthroughs on Iwo Jima. And here we see similar activity in Mark's 4th Marine Division sector. So again, we have 25th Marine Regiment over on their right wing, 23rd on their left wing, and the second wave, 24th Marines, is sort of forming the second echelon there. The engineers are, again, dispersed sort of within all of those line regiments. And now comes in some of the headquarters and support units, and this is where we really get into some of the operational aspects of Pete's system. Because you'll notice there are supply depots here and headquarters units here, and say like things like artillery units, if they're not in supply, and this is where we have to keep track of their parent organizations, if they're not in supply, they can't support the Marines, and then the Marines are not getting that all-important combined arms bonus that I was talking about earlier. So, yeah, this is, again, one of those games where supply really starts to make a big difference. Headquarters, structure, and orders of battle really start to make a difference. It's operational scale wargaming, folks, here on the tabletop. Oh yeah, now it's a party with Marine tanks finally on the beach. Now these tanks are going to be incredibly powerful because at this point of the campaign, every Marine tank company still had 2 flame-throwing tanks in it. Later, they would sort of be stripped out into specialized flame-throwing units, but here, they're still spread out through the companies. So what's happening now is Pete is rolling dice for each of these new Japanese positions that the Marines are approaching. Again, once Marine positions get within a certain distance of one of these probable Japanese defensive points, Pete chucks a dice, and depending on the result, we see what Japanese are in there. So a 6 is bad news for the Marines. That's going to be a full Japanese company. And in this case, that's going to be, of course, an entrenchment. He's going to wind up getting a field gun here. You see where Mark is helping him set up. A leader, and then 4 complete stands of infantry. So that's a formidable strong point that Mark's Marines just activated right in front of him. And Mark is now going to have to deal with either through fire or assault. One lucky break that we've really had so far is, you'll notice nothing's really been activated on the quarry. Now, historically, this was some high ground that absolutely massacred 3rd Battalion of the 25th Marines, and they caused all kinds of damage there on Blue 2 Beach. But here, yeah, they're still kind of dormant, and yeah, they haven't really opened fire yet. And that's kind of scary, because as Mark continues to push inland, that quarry is getting more and more of an open flank, just straight out enfilade fire, with heavy artillery off of an elevated position. Long story short, take your 3rd shot. 25th Marines just got their teeth absolutely kicked in by that new Japanese position that they uncovered. We kind of predicted this a second ago. Again, emplaced field gun, Machine gun support on either flank, 4 complete infantry stands, and a leader giving them a bonus. You see all these flipped over Marine stands. That's not good. They even lost a tank in that exchange. Luckily, Mark gets to shoot some of his units back, and again, he's got Amtrak and tank support, so he will get to use the combined arms bonus. Notice he gets to roll a lot more dice here, and whoa, there's a sweet roll. Again, 6s count as eliminated Japanese stands. 7, 8, 9. Yeah, there's a lot of damage there. Yeah, the Marines have had enough of that shit. That's let's go ahead and put it that way. That position, as formidable as it was, just got wiped completely off the map. But yeah, it did definitely cost him. Switching over to 5th Marine Division sector, we see where they also have quite a few tanks on the beach, and that's a good thing because they're going to need them. You see they just ran across another pretty formidable Japanese position there in the center of your screen. Meanwhile, despite his losses, Mark has more or less cleared out his sector of the beach. But again, pivoting back over here to 5th Division sector, there's that bunker there, but he has cracked that hill, and he also has some Marine companies already on the base or foothills of Mount Suribachi. Now, there will be a Marine assault against this Japanese strongpoint. Clearly, you can see where Marine units are already in base-to-base contact. I do apologize, I don't get the assault itself on camera. There's a lot going on this table, folks. Suffice it to say, the strongpoint is eliminated, and the Marines do take some casualties. And the quarry has finally activated, because we're back over to a Japanese segment in the turn sequence. Very bad news for the Marines. But I was actually starting to get a little worried about this from a historical perspective because, man, the quarry was one of the worst spots in Iwo Jima, especially in the early phases. Mount Suribachi gets all the press, but the quarry actually inflicted a lot more Marine casualties, especially against 25th Marine Regiment. This is where you see, for example, those big 320mm mortar rockets. And yeah, they're all going to open fire now straight into the flank and even the rear a little bit of 25th Marines. This is not going to be pretty when we get to that stage of the fire sequence. Japanese heavy bombardment phase starts, and what Pete's doing is he's only putting cannons in these Mount Suribachi caves when they fire and reveal themselves, and they start landing, yes, more hits against the American bombardment ships just offshore. In fact, he's managed to force this one cruiser to retire, but then Tom rolled his damage control dice and successfully reduced 4 hits back down to 3, so that cruiser might be coming back shortly, but yeah, Japanese heavy artillery is still very much a thing. In fact, now Pete is using the rest of his heavy artillery. This are going to be heavy howitzers, rocket mortars, 120mm mortars, all kinds of tubes from all over the island. I'm not kidding here, he rolls 112 dice, and he scores a total of 17 hits in this massive bombardment phase. So how this generally works is every third hit that Pete scores, he gets to pick what unit it is that he hit. And surprise, surprise, he wants to prioritize the Marine tanks. So he has scored a total of 17 hits. That means he gets to pick 5 of his hits, and he's putting them all on Marine tanks. Now, notice the Marine tanks are not just blowing up right off the bat. They've got those little yellow and red poker checks underneath them. They have been hit, and they are retiring back to the repair depot where we're going to see whether or not these tanks are actually knocked out. And this is another great facet of where Pete really starts to capture some of the aspects of operational scale wargaming. In tactical and skirmish wargaming, you guys know how it works. A tank gets hit, it brews up, and it's out of the game. Well, it's not that simple when the battle lasts several days or even weeks, because overnight these tanks get towed back to the divisional rear area, and more often than not, these tanks are back in action the next day. Often, sadly, with new crews, but the tanks themselves are often good to go. They can be easily repaired or even cannibalized for spare parts for other tanks. All that said, some Marine tank units have failed certain roles and they are legit destroyed and they're out of the game for good. These 2 tank companies have technically survived. They're combat ineffective. They have to fall back to the divisional rear area where they're going to make more rolls later in the turn sequence, and we'll see if they can recover. Meanwhile, this Amtrak over in Tom's sector is legit knocked out. His Shermans have the red checks, so they might be able to come back later on in the turn. But that Amtrak is definitely toast, so we're going to replace it with one of our wrecked Amtrak figures, as you see here. So there you are so far, folks. We've already gone through the first couple days of combat operations on Iwo Jima, and hopefully you can already tell just how fun, fast, and participation-friendly Pete's system actually is. You can probably also see where the Marines are already doing a lot better in some areas than they did historically. For instance, over on the right wing, 4th Marine Division hasn't taken nearly as much damage as they did from Japanese positions like the Quarry, for example. In other areas, the Marines are lagging behind a little bit. You'll notice that 5th Marine Division hasn't yet punched across the narrow neck of the island. Now, this was a key objective on the opening day of the actual invasion. But of course, we're just getting started here, folks. Myself and Jim Dundorf are about to land with 3rd Marine Division, and you're going to see where we use those new regiments in a radically different fashion than the Marines did during the actual assault. So please come back next week to see how Pete Panzeri's battle for Iwo Jima wraps up. And that's where we're going to leave it for now, folks. Thanks very much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. Please remember to hit that notification bell. Also, please consider joining the Sitrep Podcast Discord. There is an auto-accept invitation link to our Discord in the description of this video. Join our community, see what everybody's up to, and best of all, show us what's happening on your hobby table. But for now, this is Oriskany Jim with the Sitrep Podcast. We are rounds complete for another episode. And as always, Tango Mike for watching.